do you guys find yourself doing a lot of surveillance during the week? Are you guys supporting surveillance with that as well?
Yes, we do a ton of surveillance. It's not my favorite thing to do by any means whatsoever, being airborne, circling a target for 4.5, 5 hours at a time. But we look at the end goal and how it helps the different units that we assist by doing surveillance. And we've had some tremendous success utilizing our aircraft for surveillance. But we may fly one surveillance mission a week, but our primary focus is patrol and responding to calls for service.
Okay. Yeah, surveillance is interesting. Obviously different in a helicopter versus an airplane, and Jeff can speak to this a lot because you guys were real active in your surveillance program. But for us, we were active as well, using a helicopter. We support all of our ground teams. So we've got a fugitive apprehension team, a narcotics team, and a couple different narcotics teams. And you never know where you're going to end up, right? Like you launch and you're following a suspect going westbound on the 10, and then you're all of a sudden 605 to the 5, and then you're going back door into San Diego. You never know where you're going to end up. And I like that side of it. I also like, from a ground support standpoint, a lot of these targets end up in places where the UCs can't get to, whether it's a desolate road, that dead ends into some farmer's house or some backyard that there's no way they'd be able to see into. I think that those are the times when we prove our worth, and the evidence that we are able to gather in those situations is priceless, So I think just from a value standpoint alone, when you look at surveillance, a lot is made just in those cases by themselves. If that's all we did, I think our value to the department is huge. And then you pair that with patrol functions and all the other things that you do. You become invaluable in a lot of ways. But the surveillance is interesting, and a lot of times you get a surveillance call, you're like, oh, I don't want to go fly 60 knots, fall on the freeway. It can be boring, but the end result's usually pretty good. So I like that side of it.
Yeah. To back you on that. I mean, I was a guy that I loved doing surveillance work. I think it was interesting because a lot of times, we flew for a joint federal, state, and local task force. And so we would go everywhere from the Mexican border up into LA all the time, all over Southern California, into Arizona, Nevada. We were all over the place, initially with our helicopters and then eventually with the airplane. And, you look at the big picture of what you're supporting. And when you're doing an international controlled delivery of narcotics into the United States, of the money deals that are, ripping money from these, cartel level organizations that are, trying to get the money back to Mexico, what you're doing is some, really impactful law enforcement. Not to take away from the patrol mission, not to take away from, the day-to-day operations that we do. But when you look at it from that 30,000 foot perspective of really what you're doing, it might be, what you would call boring, but to me, it was a cat and mouse game, like to the umpth degree of watching where these people went. And John, you hit on it. A lot of times we were going into areas that the ground units couldn't get to. A lot of times the note taker was, taking notes on what I was observing from the helicopter solely. And that was used in the conviction of this person for, some really major, drug offenses that were going to put them away in federal prison for the rest of their lives. So that to me was both as a TFO and as a pilot was very satisfying, I guess. And then two, just operating in all these different environments, from the San Diego class Bravo to, the eastern deserts of California and western Arizona to, Los Angeles area in the class Bravo. As a pilot, it was, there was all sorts of different challenges. When you're orbiting over a, A380 that's landed into LAX and you're in a, MD 500 or a Cessna 206. And, I was always like, I wonder what these, airline pilots are thinking when they're like, oh, hey, be advised, you have a 12 o'clock. There's a helicopter 1,000 feet higher than you. He's got you in sight. And, and you're up at like 8,000 feet. And they're like, what the hell is a helicopter doing up here at 8,000 feet, orbiting? It was just challenging, and it was always something different, So I really enjoyed the surveillance mission from that perspective. There was a lot of times where, you're up for several hours, and then, you land, and as soon as you land, the target starts moving, and you're like, son of a bitch. And then, get fuel really quick, and then you got to catch up to these guys again. But I mean, it was super rewarding. I think just as much as, catching a bad guy for the K9 unit or anything else, it was just something that, there were so many moving pieces. And a lot of times the convictions were based solely on, especially like we would have gun deals go down on the Indian reservations, and nobody could follow those guys out there except for the aircraft. And so now they're relying strictly on what we were able to gather with the video evidence and put this whole case together. I mean, that's just, that's huge for the conviction. It's huge for the team that you're supporting. And when we started supporting we were doing this surveillance work for years with the Inca task force. It wasn't until guys started coming back from that team, back to our own organic, narcotics unit, gang units, that those guys saw the value of what the helicopters and what the airplane could do, to where they started calling us. And then next thing you know, I mean, we've got the gang unit calling us. We've got our own internal narcotics team calling us. We've got, detectives from every bureau calling us, wanting us to support whatever they're doing. So it just brings so much value back to the air unit when you start. And that's what we started doing, was advertising, hey, this is what we can do for you. And a lot of guys didn't know, because I mean, hell, I didn't even know that we did surveillance work until I came into the air unit full time. I mean, I knew we did a surveillance mission, but we were using a special agent, from the task force for that, until I came on. And then we started using our own guys, and, because I was in training, so they started using me as a tactical flight officer for it while I was doing my pilot training. And then we took the whole thing in-house, and we supported it internally. And it was, I mean, it's a great mission when you look at it from that big perspective.
Yeah. Going back to Churchill, and now the shot over the M2, like the capabilities that you get from a surveillance standpoint is huge. And I think about the times when we didn't have at least the Churchill system. You're using the split screen map. We had aero computers before they had the overlays, and the MX-10, and you'd have, the map on one side and the screen on the other, and you're splitting your attention between the map and the video, trying to call out the DOT of the target. And then you compare that with Jack Shanley. He just posted this week. He was called by their IA guys and asked to follow a target. I think it said it was northbound 5, and that's all they had. They ended up in the San Francisco area, all the way from LA. And I think about it, as a pilot, we get so used to our area of responsibility, and what, what calls you have to make, and where you have to make them, and who you're talking to, and to get in a position like that where you're flying into these airspaces you're so unfamiliar with. And, think back to those times when he's talking about, because he's saying his TFO's using binoculars, and they don't even have a camera system. So I'm imagining, paper charts, open up inside the cockpit, trying to figure out, who you got to call and where, when you're getting to the airspace. Man, the set of challenges in those conditions are so different. But even given the technology we have now, it makes it way easier, but still challenging. And I think it's great as pilots, to get us out of our normal area of operation and into some areas that we're not familiar with. So just knock that rust off and keep that training going.
Not to
Jerry,
brag,
do you guys
but
get a chance to do that very often?
Not to brag, but that's how I started when I started in doing surveillance work, was on the binos. And you would rely on the ground eye, right? The point man to call out your street names and stuff. So you would just call, hey, we're continuing northbound on, and then, hey, he just turned westbound on this street. And then you'd wait for the first, for your point man to give you that street name. And then, okay, we're westbound on this street. And that was how you did it. And to be honest, like the way I figured out my very first time doing surveillance was like, hey, we're going to take off. We're hitting the 91 freeway. We're going westbound. We're going to catch up to the team. they're following a white Honda Civic and it's going this, and I was like, shit. And now, you know, I have no idea. And they're like, we're going to be up at like 6,000 feet. You're going to be following this thing. You've got the big clunky binos. And I was like, holy hell. Like, really? Like this, are you sure? Like it was really scary. But, you know, and the way I learned it, and I didn't have any idea how this went down. Like, you know, best thing I'd done at that point is like called a pursuit. Well, that's easy. So what I did was I went off of, and y'all, if you've been to the LAPD TFO course, I'm sure I don't know if they're still showing that training video, but they show a surveillance training video from the air, like, you know, and the communications. And I just went with that, man. I watched that like 2-minute video that they showed at the TFO school. And I was like, okay, I guess that's how we're going to do it, you know, and just started kind of mimicking what I remember, you know, seeing in that video. And that's how we did it. You know, it was relying on those guys on the ground to call your streets and stuff for you. Not to, you know, be that guy that's like, you know, back in my day, but that's, you know, nowadays with these mapping systems and stuff, it's like, it's almost like child's play now, you know. I mean, it's great. Don't get me wrong. I would never go back to being, you know, twisted up like a pretzel in this right seat of a 500, you know, trying to, you know, I've probably got neck problems from that. So, but yeah, it's definitely, technology has brought us a long way in a short period of time. And it's, you know, it's a godsend to the way we're doing it now.
Yeah. And the binoculars for us now, they've got a little holder in the TFO side, and they don't ever get used except to look at coyotes on the other side of the runway. You know? They just collect dust. Eric, do you guys still have binoculars in your aircraft?
Oh, they're in the cabinet somewhere, not in the airplane.
Yeah. A little different.